So this is the last one we're doing tonight, and we've actually, I don't know how many of these we've done, but we've done over about 20 of them. So we've done lots of really good recordings online. And to be honest with you, we had a walk last night and we had a maximum number of people. So we had 30 people last night and we had 30 people 2 weeks before. We could have had more, but we had to turn people away. And to be honest with you, last night went on for about 2 hours and 15 minutes. And it's the first time I've ever actually done a walk where we have had a large group of people at the beginning and a large group of people at the end. And I told them the last story and I just thought, I can't give any more to this. So I didn't actually get in until 1 last night. So, you know, it's been, yes, because I ended up chatting to people in Cowbridge about the ghost walk. And I bumped into one set of people last night. And the people I spoke to one set of people at the pub. And they said, oh, my parents have just been on a ghost walk and apparently it was absolutely wonderful. And they learned so much. Were you aware of the ghost walk? And I just said, actually, I was the one who actually did it. So there you go, Amy. That's a commendation of what we did.
Yeah, that's good news.
So obviously the next time we'll be doing a ghostly thing will actually be in 2 weeks' time. And that's actually going to be Cowbridge. So Ellen, John, or whoever's listening, if you want to take part in that, you need to book in advance because we can't have any more than 30 people on these walks. And they do get pretty quick.
2 weeks' time then?
2 weeks' time, yeah.
I should put in my diary.
Ellen, it's a wonder you've actually got space in your diary.
I know, look at it. This is now.
Okay, this is actually
2 weeks' time. Wait a minute, I've got to count to what 2 weeks' time is.
This is actually my diary for today.
What's the date?
The date is actually the 11th.
Of September.
Yeah, that's right. So, do you know one thing I wanted to do tonight? As a fitting end, I wanted to, look at some ghost stories from Ghosts of Glamorgan, a book we brought out last year with wonderful Michelle illustrating it. So I think the best thing we can do is get a nice image in the background. And I've actually got the very image that we can actually use. So I'm just going to actually make sure that I get that in front of me. Amy, whilst I'm getting that image up in front of us, how did you feel last night went?
I think it went great last night. You know, I put so much energy into it last night. I'm absolutely knackered now. But
yeah,
it was great. Great people, really enthusiastic people, which is always good. And of course, I did come across the demonies. But, yeah, it was fun.
But that's the whole point. You need to scare people occasionally.
What did you do last night?
We actually did Cowbridge last night. Oh, no, not Cowbridge, Lantwick Major. Lantwick Major last night.
Oh, Friday. Sorry, I thought it was a day out. Sorry.
Yeah, we did Lantwick Major last night. So that was really, because of Dennis and all the rest of it, it was, yes, we actually read out a poem from out a poem from Dennis's book, actually. And I'm thinking that maybe it would be a good idea if I read out another poem from his book. Should we hear another one of his poems? I think we should. Yeah. So I'm just going to...
I emailed you and I thought you said it was off. I thought you said the next one was... Never mind.
Yeah, no, you emailed me and I said it was in the evening and you said you didn't want to come out in the wet and the rain and the wind.
Yeah, that's true.
So...
I forgot it was that one, sorry.
Yeah, don't worry, it's fine. We do actually have another Cowbridge one coming up.
Sorry.
Don't worry, it's fine.
I got the scaffolders coming in 2 days' time, or 2 days' time. Then my chimney's going to be taken down. I'm moving stuff everywhere. I'm worn out. Sorry.
No, don't apologise. So
I
the thing.
really meant to come on that. Sorry.
Oh look, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's okay. It's perfectly fine. So if I put this in the background now and share the screen, bingo, excellent. So here we go. So what I thought, actually, there was a poem I read out last night from Dennis's book, which is the Rhododendron Forest, and Dennis used to turn up at all. Well, he probably missed about 1 or 2 ghost walks, but he pretty much turned up at all my ghost walks. I think he did the Lantric Major ghost walk about 5 times. And anyway, this is one of poems. This is one of the poems from Dennis Doyle's book, The Rhododendron Forest. It goes, I must have slept a season on this beat. Start again. I got to do this right. I thought I am going right. Get closer. I haven't got my glasses on. The name of the poem is Leave to Go, which is quite appropriate. So we lost Dennis about 5 weeks ago in a road traffic accident in Boverton, and it goes as follows: I must have slept a season on this bench, and now the dew is warping my long bones. Let me roll sideways till I stand upright. The sly goat slips his chain. No need to wrench. I am enfranchised by the pitch of light. The sky is bloomed like berries, and although my locked feet still tap figures out of these stones, this blue day is my letter. I can go. And to be honest with you, that's quite appropriate, because I think it was actually Dennis's time to go that day. He went instant, and that was it. And I've said that to people. And last night's walk was in tribute to Dennis. And what I would like to do is look at some stories from Ghosts of Glamorgan. The first one is very appropriate. And the reason why this first story is very appropriate is I mentioned it last night in passing. This story was from Desmond Johnson. Takes us to the northwestern outskirts of Llanmaes, near Lantric Major, to the old rectory. This was a functioning rectory until 1988, until a church sold it into private hands. The landscape has changed very little in the 80-odd years that this story originated. In interviewing Desmond about this little gem, I was aware of the Frampton ghost horse associated with Adam Defrankton, but I felt that the link was tenuous because of the number of horses mentioned. According to Desmond, definitely more than one there was. So let's therefore begin. We were in Llanmaes, by the back of the rectory. It was a windy, dark night, and we were ferreting, poaching. It was a long time ago. We could hear horses galloping in a field, so we jumped into the hedge and got out the way. But we didn't see any horses at all pass us. So I said about it weeks after to this chap I talked to. I asked him, "Has the farmer got any horses?" And he replied that the farmer hasn't got any horses in the field. Well, he didn't that night, I remarked jokingly. There was more than one horse, quite a few by the sounds of it. We felt at that moment. I think it was the cavalry. You could hear them coming. The horses like that would be heard galloping towards us a mile away. It was quick as that we just heard them gallop past. When we looked, we were hoping to see them, and we didn't, sadly. And this is a story that I usually talk about when I'm in Land Mice itself. But we mentioned last night in the walk in Landsford Major about Adam Defrankton. And the story about Adam Defrankton is that after he had killed the last Prince of Wales at Kilmary on the 11th of December 1282, I mentioned that he retired in South Wales after being knighted by the king. And he was given a large sum of money, so he retired. But after 5 years, he was so remorseful that he ended up driving his horse one day, and the horse threw him and he broke his neck. And the story that I tell in Landsford Major associated with Adam Defrankton is that a ghostly horse is heard galloping along, and suddenly it stops. That's really important. And then a sudden thud is heard on the ground, and then nothing more. And that's said to be the horse galloping, stopping, and then throwing his rider, Adam Defrankton, on the ground, breaking his neck. Now, that's actually about land mice, and it's interesting that we've included this story about land mice, and it's got a lot to do with the likes of Adam Defrankton. I've got a few stories in this book that we've read out, because when we looked at the Lays, which is Charleston, Aberthaw, we've done that one. But one I haven't done is this one. It's rather interesting, this next one. So if we go to this next one, this is another one by Desmond Johnson. This is Woodford on the Beach Road. And that's a rather interesting story. And Michelle illustrated all these stories in the book. And those big boots, we researched those boots that she drew. And it took a lot of research to work out what the story was about. So you can't just look at these stories without understanding what they're talking about. And actually, I've said this many times before, it's very difficult to make up a ghost story, because say, for example, I'm going to make up a ghost story about the Second World War. And say, for example, I was going along this one day and there was a guy coming towards me with slacks on. And, you know, he was really frightening and so on. And somebody said, well, you didn't have slacks in the 1940s. And then just a little bit of an example. And you're just thinking, well, and if you try to invent a story, you've got to be very specific. And you can easily be tripped up. So when you come across these stories, you've got to interview people. And there's actually the next story that I'm going to mention is a story that about a Norman knight at Pencleen. I come across this woman called Anna Davis, and Anna gave me this story, and I questioned her over and over again. But we won't do that one yet, because that ties in with verifying stories, actually. You know, you've got to make sure you try to see if these stories are factual or not. Okay, Woodford Road, Woodford House. Not Woodford Road, the Beach Road, Woodford House. Having been a very adventurous lad, Desmond Johnson found himself in some exotic locations. Woodford House was no exception. Woodford House is located on a stretch of road fondly known as the Beach Road. Its actual name for reference is, in fact, Colhew Street, Landsford Major. So, do you see there, I had to research the word the Beach Road. And that's what it would have been known as when this story was being, examined or being pictured in the giver's head, and the giver being Desmond Johnson. Heading towards the coast, I call Hugh Bay, and the Iron Bank and Ditched Enclosure, the Iron Age Hill Fort. I mentioned that lots last night as well, didn't I, Amy?
Yeah.
Like many locations up and down the coastline, throughout the First and Second World Wars, our large mansions and residential buildings were utilised as housing by servicemen and women of all nations. Woodford was to serve as quarters for troops serving in the First World War. Unlike many others that accommodated them, Candleston at Merthyr Mawr, Ham Manor, Lantern Major, Dunraven and Southerndown, these would not survive into the modern day. You can imagine that the wear and tear in use over wartime would have taken its toll on these once proud buildings, and they did. There was a lot of damage caused to Ham Manor in the First World War, and Candleston Manor simply didn't survive. Dunraven, as we all know, was demolished in 1963. This story takes us in time around the late 1930s, just before the outbreak of the Second World War. And when you read the term naily boots, think of heavy black hobnail boots. So when somebody's telling you these stories, they're not spelling out the words. And when I was originally listening back to the story, I thought he said something completely different than naily boots. And I really didn't understand what he meant. And then I said to his daughter, Lynn, what did your dad mean? Because at the point just before we published the book, she said, oh, he actually meant black nail boots, black hobnail boots. I thought, oh, brilliant. So I now understand what they are. Because when he originally said it, I thought he said navy boots, because it was the way he said it. He said navy boots, navy boots. And actually, when you listen to it again really closely, it actually says naily boots, navy boots. I thought, what the hell are navy boots? Well, navy boots are obviously not going to have metal on them, because the sparks might, react with a cordite and cause an explosion or something like that. So then he actually meant naily boots, not navy boots. That could have gone into print forever as navy boots, and nobody would have known what they were. And the reason why I had to ask his daughter was because she died. Because he died last year before the book came out. Between the wars, Woodford House on the Beach Road, the old rectory, had been lain empty. There had been soldiers in it during the war, World War I, 1914, 1918, and they'd gone. Russell, my cousin, and I went in nosing around Woodford House. He was great with his words, nosing around. As all adventurous lads would do, we headed upwards. Always head upwards. After negotiating the bare wooden stairs, we found ourselves on the first floor. There were just wooden floors. Preoccupied with exploring, we became startled while we were up there. Startled while we were up there. So they'd gone upstairs and they were startled by something. They heard an ominous noise, an ominous sound, as he puts it. We could hear boots clumping, naily boots coming up the stairs. So you can imagine that would be absolutely terrifying. When he was telling me the story and I listened back to it, I imagined these two boys petrified upstairs, and the stairs and this figure coming upstairs. You can almost imagine it, can't you? this very heavy man coming upstairs, something out of a horror movie. Anyway, that's going on in my head. Back to the story. We quickly fled from the landing. We found ourselves wandering. Start again. I got that wrong. We found ourselves wondering whether to go into a room, the second bedroom along the passage, but continued running, they said. Was there anyone pursuing us? The landing continued to go right around the back of that house, and there was doors in the wall where you can go into the attic. So we didn't know who it was coming in, so got up into the gods. Do you know, I love that word, getting up into the gods, because I didn't know what that word gods meant when I first heard it about 8 years ago. I was staying in Cumbria, and this lady said, "You're staying in the gods." And I thought, what are they? And she showed me where I was staying. She meant actually in the attic. So lots of people don't know what that term means. So I had to look that word up again to make sure that what I knew was actually what he meant. He actually meant the attic. He mentions the attic earlier on, but he does go into the attic, the gods. We were squinting, peeping in through the doors, and the sound went into the bedroom below us. The sound of the naily boots was walking towards the window, but we could see there was no one there. So they're obviously peering down through little cracks and stuff. How could this be? Were we hearing things? Both of us at the same time hearing things? This did not seem right. Just the noise was enough to chill us to the bone. We got out of there a bit quick. There was no sign of anybody. I like that story because I imagined so much. I imagined being one of his friend in the attic, and was sort of panicking and shaking and wondering if there's anyone down below. To be honest with you, my reaction would be to stay in the attic for a while. And then the other thing I would have done was to actually then gently wandered down from the attic, and then wandered down the stairs, and then made it sharpish out the door. And there were lots of these houses about, actually. You know, lots of places that people could explore and so on. And I was talking to Richard yesterday, who does research for Archaeology Cymru, and he said there used to be this house in Barry, this very little cottage, and there was thatched roof, and there were stairs, and they would go upstairs and explore it and stuff. All these little buildings that used to be around. There's still lots of these buildings out there if you sort of go on YouTube and you look at urban explorers and so on. But I tell you what, it's quite a frightening thing to go into a derelict building. It really is. When I was reading that story, I got a little bit distracted. That's why I got my words wrong. And I wrote a word down in my diary. It reminds me of a building that's near Landoc. It's got a roof on it and everything, and it's starting to collapse, and there's stairs and stuff there. And I was thinking of that, and I thought I need to actually get there before it all collapses. And it's the whole point of telling these stories is to try to get people imagining what the past is like. And this is why our ghost walks on a Friday evening are so popular, because what we do on the ghost walks now, we change what we do. Instead of, you know, when we used to do ghost walks, we used to say, oh, by the way, we've got another walk, or we do archaeology classes and that, and chuck stuff in there. But now what we do with the walks, we are solid, and we just tell stories. And this is why me, Amy, and Men are absolutely knackered, because for 2.5 hours, it's constant. Actually, we were doing it for 3 hours on Friday, because we've got to process everybody. We've got to make sure they got face masks on. They've got to know that the protocol that we're following and all the rest of it. It's quite draining, actually. So when you're telling these stories, you're also imagining these stories. So another story here from an Anna Davis. Oh, this Anna Davis is a wonderful, kind woman, and she invited me over to her house. So I'm actually going to take up the offer one day and go in for a cup of tea. So when Anna found out that we were doing writing a book on ghost stories, she said, "Can I have a chat with you?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I've got a story about a Norman knight at Pentleen, and that's the title. And I'm going to tell you what I think of this story when we finished it. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that Anna hears this recording. I live about a quarter of a mile from an old medieval building that has been extended onto extensively over the years, particularly in the mid-1800s, into a family home. The house is within the parish of Pentleen, which is not far from the 848 and Pentre-Merrick. The time of year was early autumn. The temperature wasn't cold or windy. The weather, it was reasonably warm. Fine evening, and the sun was shining, and the time of day was 4 p.m. I was walking up the path towards the medieval house. A little while before, days before, I remembered a large branch from a beech tree that had come down across the track. It was laying horizontal, but the side branches were vertical. And this is all of these stories are actually exactly what these people have told me. I've not doctored these, they're exactly their own words. It was in broad daylight that I suddenly stopped with shock, because there in front of me by the fallen beech branch was a Norman man with a plain face. Was this man in a pre-skirmish thought? He's wearing a very long, dull, plain, woolen, moss green cloak, and with one of the traditional Norman metal helmets. The helmet was that traditional long shape dome with a nasal piece protection bar on it. So you can imagine this was the image that we thought. So we got the nasal bar, you know, it's all going on there. He wasn't looking directly at me, but slightly off to the left. He didn't at all turn his body or face to face me. A Norman man, a soldier, but wasn't totally dressed as one. The gown covering his armor, he looked completely lost in thought, thinking it would be that he was wondering what on earth he should do. So in other words, it's somebody thinking, well, what should I do next? Where should I go next in life? Should I become a famous actor, or should I just continue teaching people archaeology? What do I do next? That type of thing. The color on the only visible piece of clothing was a significant detail. The woolen cloak went all the way down to ground level. I couldn't see hands or arms. The body shape was completely contained by the cloak. And I stood, first of all. My heart was pounding, and obviously I didn't want to carry on walking past him. If I had, I would have been within 2 feet of him. Do you know what? I should say to Anna that she should have confronted that individual and maybe asked him what was wrong. And if she does watch this, I would say if she ever sees that figure, have a word with a Norman knight. He's not going to hurt you. He's a ghost. Here we go. And I must have stood there for 4 to 5 minutes wondering what I should do and what on earth was going to happen. I was feeling perturbed while I was there because I was there long enough and looking at him long enough to know that I wasn't imagining anything. And it wasn't a trick of the light or a branch or anything like that. It was a real person. How did I feel? This, I thought, wasn't a simple occurrence. Whilst I was standing there, I asked myself, am I seeing this? Am I seeing this? Seeing this? Amazing. It's a ghost. Amazing. I kept thinking, am I seeing this? I was questioning myself. I didn't want to go nearer, further forward, as there was no doubt there was someone there. I was there long enough to really affirm that it wasn't a trick of the light. No less than 30 feet away, 10 meters away. That's not far away at all. It's from me over to looking at my kitchen. Amazing. There was no movement from him, from his head or anything else. And I just stood still, stupidly there looking at him. And I had no camera and could take no photographs. Even if you had, I would say, you may not have replicated the image. After 4 to 5 minutes, I sort of turned around and started to walk down the path. After a few steps, I turned my head around to look at him, and he was no longer there. What a shame. What a lost opportunity. But the visibility was perfect, and there is no doubt he was a man. And I was actually looking at someone, a three-dimensional person. And you know what? Personally, I don't doubt Anna at all. There's definitely something there. This is a great description. I tell you what, you must have been smoking more than just newsprint to have seen that. You know, this is something significant. This is a significant event. I've been up to the path many, many times, not just in daylight, but in darkness with a torch and in the moonlight, having walked that path a few times. I haven't seen anything like that before or since. This story will leave with the question, was the Norman man a lord of the manor, a warrior, or someone else? We may never know. Sometimes I ask the question of those who give me these stories. That's me now. Did they originate from the village? Did that person telling the story to me originate in that village, Pentleen or anywhere else? If so, the story was indicative of that part of us passed down through the person's DNA, a real event, an echo of an actual event. I asked Anna where she felt her family originated from. She replied, I originated from Lantern Major, but I have no historical links with Pentleen. My mother was from London and my father was from Newcastle. So as an author, that's me. I cannot forward any explanation of this sighting. But I gotta be honest with you. If Anna was here now, I would say, why did you move to Pentleen in the first place? What a strange, isolated place to move to. You must have some link. There must be something there. And as stories go, I absolutely love that story. It's really genuine. I can't fault that story. It sounds good. It does all the tick boxes. And I would say, what a shame. What a shame that, you know, what a shame, you know, that person couldn't have gone up to the Norman Knight. But you know what? I'm full of it myself, because whenever I've seen ghosts, I've turned tail and run. I saw the one ghost at Tinkinswood Burial Chamber, and I did try to have a conversation with that ghost, but I was offish. I didn't go near that ghost, and I was absolutely petrified. So, okay, Anna, you probably did what I would have done. But if there's ever an opportunity for Anna to ever see that figure, I would say question that figure, and we possibly could learn more. What I'm going to do a minute is, John, if you want a quick chat with Ellen a moment, and I've just got to do something in the background, and I will be back. But I want to continue discussing that story for a little bit before we do one more story tonight. So I'll be back.
how's the hedgehogs doing, Alan?
Fine. I just put all their. I've got 5 feeding stations, so I just put all the food out in the garden now before Carl started.
Oh, good. Well done.
Yeah.
Things are starting up with Gwent Wildlife Trust again, thankfully. But, oh, crikey, the paperwork we've got to sign now to take part is unbelievable. And anyway, within the next week or so, we shall be back mink monitoring, which is good.
What's monitoring?
Mink monitoring.
Right. Yeah.
Because, of course, they yomped through 96% of our Welsh water voles, and we have it back to a large degree. And prior to COVID, in the last 12 months, we'd only managed to kill 2 mink, which was pretty good considering 10 years ago, perhaps when we first started it, we killed 32. So yeah, it's working, and it also helps the kingfishers as well, because of course they make the burrows in
the banks. Yeah. How were the kingfishers when we had all that rain the other week?
Well, as far as I'm aware, they're all right, but I think they tend to be a little bit like water voles. Somebody else said that to me about water voles, but they've got holes on different levels, so they can always escape. Yeah. They've even got holes away from the banks, actually, as well. So they're not stupid. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, have you got any injured hedgehogs or anything like that you look at?
No, they're all okay and being fed up. You know. Yeah, get their weight up and that. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. You don't get problems from cats or anything like that?
No, I've got a feeding station. So I've got like a little square of bricks with a little hole in it, and then old slates on the top.
All right, so that keeps
so it keeps dogs and cats out.
Yeah. I'm going to say, because cats, I would imagine, especially, are going to be a problem with the hedgehogs, I would have thought.
No, not really. I've got a spare cat, a stray one. So he gets fed and he knows what spot he's in for his food bowl.
All right. Oh,
yeah,
that's
so
good.
at the beginning of this lecture, I was feeding him in the kitchen.
Oh.
And then I've shut the kitchen door now. He won't let me shut the door. So I've got to leave the kitchen door open while he eats, and then shut it when he goes. Yeah.
You're doing a good job. I'm pleased somebody else in the community, well, archaeological community, has got an interest in such things. I thought it was the only one, but, well, fair dues to Carl. Yeah, he does his fair bit for wildlife as well, very much so, with his corvids, and I do admire him for it, that's for sure. I mean, I'd love to have a crow on my shoulder, but I don't think Margaret would be too pleased with where it's depositing its bowels, but that's another question.
Well, interesting enough, this year we've had 3 crows, and every single one we've happily released, and they've been really delightful creatures. We had so we've had 3 crows, and we've also had a jackdaw as well. But it was the tamest jackdaw we've ever had, because jackdaws do not like any kind of captivity whilst you're trying to feed them up.
Really?
I got jackdaws in the chimneys, and if the young fall out of the nest, they roll down the roof and onto the floor. So I've got one of those very large dog crates, you know, the metal framed.
Yeah, that's what we use.
And what I do in the spare bedroom, I balance it on the foot of the single bed, on planks across to the open window, so that they can hear the other jackdaws and have the fresh air. And so I feed them for a couple of days and then let them out.
Yeah,
that seems to work well. You know, I haven't got them sort of completely indoors, and I'm not bothering them other than to take food and water to them.
Yeah,
Oh, well done.
yes, no. The thing is with our crows is that the technique that we use seems to always work, and we did have one crow for a whole year. She just wouldn't leave. We used to leave the door open. She could fly. She was really happy. She just wouldn't leave. And then suddenly I went to clean out her cage and she went, shh, never saw her again.
Good Lord.
But that's what they're like.
Do you take jackdaws to be intelligent?
I think creatures are intelligent, aren't they?
Oh no, no, jackdaws. A jackdaw's intelligence is actually, in a group. They work really good in a group. Individual jackdaws, they're a bit disorientated, but when there's a group,
Really?
they work really well. Yeah, they're a bit like meerkats. There's always one. There's always one on lookout. They've usually got several lookouts, and because what we've got in the garden, we've got our feeder, which a certain John Stevenson provided.
Yes.
And they go around that feeder, and there's always one on a post high up. There's another one nearby, and they all eat, and then they go down to the ground and eat what the others are bringing off. There's like pecking order as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And last night on the ghost walk, after everyone had gone, I saw these. I could hear some rustling in the hedge, and I saw these two absolutely massive hedgehogs, and I just thought they look really cute. And the best thing to do with hedgehogs in the wild is to say hello and just leave them alone, and they were really happy. So
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, we got no right to touch them in the wild because that's where they should be.
Yeah, yeah.
But mind you, what used to get on my wick is that we used to get phone calls off members of the public saying, oh, they found this absolute huge hedgehog in a field. And you're thinking, that's where they're meant to be.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but it was in a field wandering around eating slugs. It shouldn't have been there. And I'm thinking, well, where else is it going to be? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, that's where it should be, yeah.
Oh, and it's huge. Is it healthy? And I'm thinking, right, all right,
Probably
then.
pregnant.
Probably. Anyway, I want to do one other story before we finish tonight. And
All right.
I'm just going to mention that these ghost evenings were meant to sort of, make do whilst we were waiting, but we got our ghost walks back. And what we're doing now is that we're starting a new evening on a Thursday, and that new evening on a Thursday, not starting this week, but in a week Thursday, and it will be looking at archaeological techniques like aerial photography, radiocarbon dating. So you're transferred to the Thursday, Ellen, and if you want to join us as well, John, you'll be very welcome.
Well, Margaret's shown an interest in that, so I think she will participate.
Oh, that'd be good.
In that at the moment. But Thursday is not good for me because I've got church goings on Thursday.
John,
so,
we'll have Margaret anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Well, no, exactly, yeah.
What date is that Thursday?
Right, we're not starting it this Thursday, but we're going to be starting it on the 10th.
All right, okay.
Sorry, there's nothing for you, Ellen, on a Thursday or a Saturday evening next week, but there is on the 10th.
So on the 10th, we've got archaeology at 10:30 in the morning. And in the evening, what time in the evening?
7:30. For 1 hour.
All right, okay.
Basically, it's looking at all the stuff that we do, but in, this is aerial photography. So we'll do the whole thing for an hour on aerial photography.
That's the day my Rayburn's coming.
Oh, right. Okay. Fair enough. Well, not fair enough because that's something to celebrate.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I used to have a Rayburn, Ella. Oh, what marvellous tools they are.
Well, all my life, I've only ever had wood central heating.
Aye.
When you get up in the morning, the house is freezing. And when you come home in the afternoon, the house is freezing. And so it's my first go of having automatic central heating and an ambient temperature.
Yeah, but it costs more.
Yeah, I know that.
We had a Rayburn for 6 years when we lived at Kingsclear. Absolutely wonderful devices. You know, they kept the water warm, they kept the kitchen warm. Oh my God, yes. And it ran off anthracite, which is probably hard to get hold of these days, but yeah.
No, mine's going to be on oil, so it'll be just doing itself.
Aye. Yeah, ours was anthracite, which is a marvellous coal. It'll last 24 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are. I think there's one drift mine anthracite in the Blind Garrow Valley.
I
There was
think
an
it's
article in the
closed.
paper this week.
Yes, it did. You're right.
Last mine in Britain has shut.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
I cut it out somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Oh
right.
no, but there's very small mines, little sort of, little concerns. So where was this mine that you said closed then?
I can't remember. I did cut the clipping out, so I'll have to find it to send to you.
Yeah, send it to me as well, please.
We're into that. Oh, she's just about to find it, John.
Well, she's gone. I sent you an application as requested for the newsletter. Did you get that?
Is this for Margaret?
No, it's for both of us. You asked us to do an article.
Oh, right, we had it.
Flood.
Yeah, we had it, John. We've got that. That's going to go in, not this one, but the next one. Yes, we got it.
Oh, I missed this one, did I? Oh, right, okay.
Well, you may not have. We'll see what the space is like, John.
Yeah, because you did ask us for it, and we thought duty bound will do it.
It's going in, John. It's going in, John. And actually, this mine, I've actually got it online.
Oh, right.
Can you see that?
Not yet.
No, we've just got the book up.
Bingo.
Something's coming off now.
One of England's last coal mines.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like anthracite as well.
Yeah. So dozens of jobs at risk as operator Banks Group voices frustration at pressures to secure permission to extend lifetime of coal mine. One of England's last remaining coal mines is set to close today in County Durham after an application from operator Banks Group to extend the lifetime of the mine was turned down by the government earlier this summer. So in other words, that's the end.
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? I mean, anthracite was a marvellous coal and smokeless as well, or so called. And we used it at Kingsclear for our Rayburn, and it was marvellous. It really was. It run on a shovelful for 24 hours.
Yeah, I grew up with like a coal oven, and we didn't have radiators. It was just that, like, similar to a Rayburn, and you put coal on it, and then that's where you could cook.
We used to cook bread on it as well.
We did.
Oh, God, yeah.
This always happens when you're doing a last lecture. On here, there's something interesting. And there's something interesting in this line here. Last November, the government controversially gave the green light to West Cumbria Mining to build the UK's first deep coal mine in over 30 years, despite opposition. The Woodford House colliery is set to extract and process up to 2.5 million tons of coal each year for the UK's steelmaking industry. Actually, that's a good point. How do you create steel if you don't have coal?
Well, oxygen lancers.
Now, come on, John. Have we got the technology to do that on a vast scale?
Well, I think it's been going for some years. But I don't know. Maybe the coal as such. Yes, because the oxygen lancers go into the coke or the coal. Yeah, I'm with you now.
Yeah. No, you're talking about the process of using waste coke. But waste coke is not going to last forever, is it?
No, it's not. So we're to make
So-
steel. Yes.
So in other words, they've closed a tiny mine, and now they're opening a massive one.
Well, yeah.
And actually, I'm all for it. We're going to lose all our industry at this rate. So,
Another question before you go. Am I picking Dwayne up tomorrow?
yes, you are.
Does he know that? It doesn't matter if he don't. I'll give him a phone call.
Yeah, you need to give him a phone call. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right,
So what
What are you doing tomorrow?
Oh, we're excavating at Trellick if you're interested from 12 o'clock onwards.
No, I've got to do a lot of clearing for the workmen to come in.
I know you do. That's why we haven't been bothering you with it. But
Right.
we'll be doing a couple more dates. That's right. The next time we go out there, Ellen, you should come because you'll have your central heating system and you'll be able to get up in the morning in the warm and you'll be able to go home in the warm and you'll be able to tell us all about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, keep me posted.
Well, just John, I'm sure John will mention it. So
Right.
don't worry about it. So, right.
I haven't got your details, so I can't.
Oh, no, you'll mention it when we do an evening like this.
Oh, all right then. Right. Okay.
So what I want to do is finally 2 points before we call it a night. Amy's left us because she's just heard that one of her friends has just died.
Oh, God.
So, yes. Anyway. So, right. So let's write that down there. Right. Let's get to it. Now, one thing about this story from Anna in the book, it's, you know, I love stories like that because they seem and look very genuine. And when you examine them, they come out really well. What I would like to do finally is one other story from the book. Unlike Amy, I'm pretty knackered. So there's this little story in the book as well. It's actually, I've already done this one in one of the other evenings, but I'm going to do it again. It's from Marcross. It's the church ghost at Marcross. And we'll just discuss it and that's it. Often, do we regret to record those stories from our loved ones? And when we want to recall them, it is too late. Our loved ones have passed on, never again to fill in those missing details and become those ghosts that this book describes. One such case that epitomizes the above sentiment is the following short story. Mandy McCourt recalls the ghost seen inside Marcross Church, a story from a first-hand account thanks to her mum. Mum was in the church at Marcross, praying. Mum was alone. When Mum was in the process of her prayers, focused in her mind, looking at the back of the pew in front of her, she felt a presence. Mum looked up and she saw a person stood in front of her. It was a ghostly figure. There is an eerie atmosphere in the church. Alas, my mum is no longer with us, and we were unable to add much more to the story. Its own published ghost story haunts the church at Marcross, once told about a ghost that frequented the churchyard, hovering above a particular grave. As for explaining Mandy's mum's spirit, I guess with this story we will never know the detail of what exactly was seen that day. But look up the ghost story of Marcross Church graveyard, and you shall be enlightened about the other story, but not the story that a mum saw of a ghost that day in the church, because a mum is now passed on to spirit. And alas, we can't get any more details. And it's so frustrating that at the time when we're told these stories, we don't ask any more detail. But when I was told the story by Anna about the ghost at Penclean, that really told us a great deal of information. But unfortunately, unlike the story at Marcross, we can't say any more. So the moral of the story and the sentiment of the story is if anyone ever tells you a ghost story, write it down, get as much detail as possible, and then we might glean some information about that ghost, that location, and tell us a little bit more of the past that we didn't know before. On that note, we're going to call it a day. We're going to call it an end to over 20 odd lectures from the beginning of the pandemic. But we will carry on, alas, on a Thursday evening with something completely different. But I will now say that teaching solidly 7 days a week from the beginning of the pandemic, I am no longer teaching now on a Thursday. That again. I am no longer teaching on a Friday, Saturday, and I trottle off to Trellick on a Sunday once a fortnight. That will now be once a month, and we've got our ghost walks that I do once a fortnight on a Friday. But I've now got some of my life back. So we can only do so much for the pandemic, and now it's over. We can get on with our lives. And I know before anyone says it's not over, but I want to get on with my life, and that's exactly what I'm doing. So anything anyone would like to say before we finish tonight?
Thank you for doing tonight. It's been really lovely. Thank you.
My pleasure. And you are lovely as well, Ellen. Get on with your life. Get on with everything you need to do. And anything you would like to say, John, before we close it?
No, because, I mean, as a modern day spiritualist, I think possibly completely differently to how you see things, but no matter. I don't convert people. I just have my own faith. Margaret doesn't support me, but that's fair enough. I mean, she's always been a staunch Methodist. So was I years ago. And amazingly, the people I have communication with are more often than not the people that were very staunch Methodists who would not even consider mentioning spiritualism. So there we are. But when we pass over, as you said, to spirit, I'm amazed that you used that word spirit. Yes, we do tend to think differently in this modern day and age. And
at the end of all these things, John, there are different ways of looking at things.
Absolutely.
And the other thing as well is, John, you've been more or less solid with these on a Saturday. And Ellen as well, thanks for joining us. And
I missed one.
Oh, you did you?
I missed one, yeah. And you know why that was?
Why?
Because I forgot about it.
Fair enough.
You got to know what day is what now, isn't it?
Well, since I've retired, Ellen, yes, I do. And I very often think Fridays are Saturdays and Saturdays are Sundays. And It's not that I've got nothing to do anymore. My timetable is absolutely crammed, not only with what I do with KARL, but church and other things as well. Wildlife, Gwent Wildlife, and I'm going to be even more wrapped up with that shortly. And more recently, I got wrapped up with an app on the phone to do with birds. You switch your phone on and it listens to birds chirping, and it comes back to you and it says, oh, that's a robin, that's whatever it is, or it's a chaffinch or something like that, which is absolutely fascinating.
Oh, that is absolutely amazing, John. That is.
Bird Net, it's called.
Bird Net. Do you know what? I'm going to say it, right? I'm going to say it. I had a conversation with a group of people. As I said, there was this group of people who said that they had relatives that had gone on the walk, and I said, actually, I did the walk, and they said, oh, you went on the walk as well. What did you think? And I said, yeah, I was the one who actually. Oh, right, okay. And the thing is, right, we are in a completely different world now, and I used to hear people say, oh, our Thursday mornings were a massive part of our lives, and now I'm hearing the same thing, but in a different way. The online stuff is a massive part of our lives, And
Yes.
that's the way it's going to be. Do you know, Dave,
Yep.
do you know what? I'll leave you into a secret, right? When Michelle and I move, wherever we do move, she said, you're not going to be traveling down to, you're not going to be traveling down on a Thursday to teach your classes on a Thursday morning in Lanford Major and Bridgend, are you? And I said, yeah, I'll be doing that every week. The thing is, I do it online every week, and it's fine by me.
Absolutely. I mean, this is my contention when it comes to church. I haven't got to get the car out. I just sit here, and it's no different, really, to being in church in reality, I suppose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And on
It's
that,
marvellous, really.
Exactly. And on that note, John, do you know what? I'm going to call it a night. And Ellen, I will see you in the week, hopefully soon.
Okay.
Hopefully Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah.
And then, John, I will see you tomorrow. And thanks for joining us. We're going to call it a night and the end of this course on the Saturday. And thank you very much. I'm off.
And thank you for doing.
No, my pleasure. It's been my pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for the
Thanks,
support.
Carl. And can you pass on condolences to Amy about her friend?
I will phone her now.
All right. Okay.
Yes, I'm mine. Yeah.
I will.
That is really
Thank
sad.
you.
It is.
Okay. Yeah.
It
All
is.
right. Bye. Both. See you again.
Take
Bye,
care.
Ellen.
Take care,
Thank you.
Ellen. Bye.
Happy
Night-night.
Easter.
Bye.
Yeah.
Happy
Bye.
Easter. Take care, Alan.